$2 billion. That's what Zynga offered for Rovio in 2011. The creators of Angry Birds said no. We're worth more. 12 years later, the company was sold to Sega for $776 million, less than half of that offer. And 3 years after that, Sega wrote down $200 million off the purchase price, because even at that price, Rovio wasn't what it promised to be. This is Angry Birds, 5 billion downloads, the first mobile superstar, and one of the biggest missed opportunities in the history of the games industry. But to understand how a company that turned down $2 billion sold for less than half, we need to go back to 2009, to a moment when 8 people in a Finnish office were staring at their last bit of money and a very strange drawing. Early 2009, Espoo, Finland, the offices of Rovio Mobile. The company is 6 years old. In that time, 51 games. For Nokia, for various publishers, not a single hit. The team has shrunk to 8 people. Money is running out. Resources, enough for one final attempt. And then game designer Jaakko Isalo shows the team something strange. A screenshot. Round birds without wings or legs. Very angry. And no indication what kind of game this would be. Nicholas Head later recalled, "People saw this picture and it was just magical. These birds don't have legs and can't fly. And they're very angry. We all started thinking what made them so mad. Simple characters. And everyone just sat there thinking. The answer came simply, maybe someone stole their eggs?" At the time, swine flu was all over the news. That's how the green pigs appeared. Sickly, greenish antagonists. Here's a detail that says a lot about Rovio. Although the swine flu connection became the official story, Isalo himself later said he'd been drawing pigs since childhood, around age 10. The truth is somewhere in between. But what matters is this: the team didn't have a clear plan. They had a sketch everyone liked and built a game around it. The gameplay was inspired by Crush the Castle, a popular Flash game. Catapult, physics, destroying structures. Rovio took that idea, replaced rocks with birds, medieval castles with the pigs' wooden glass structures, and polished it to a shine. On December 11th, 2009, Angry Birds launches on iOS, the studio's 50-second game. At launch, almost nothing, minimal downloads. The game was invisible among thousands of others. But Nicholas Head knew they'd made something special before any numbers came in. One December evening, his mother was cooking a Christmas turkey and burned it because she couldn't put down her son's game. And then, in February 2010, Apple featured Angry Birds in the UK App Store. The game shot to #1 in Britain, then the US, and stayed at #1 for 275 days. From a burned turkey to #1 in the world, in 2 months. But the game alone wouldn't have turned Rovio into a billion-dollar company. One person did that, Peter Vesterbacke, nickname Mighty Eagle, Rovio's chief marketing officer. Vesterbacke came from Hewlett-Packard, not a gamer, a businessman. And he repeated one phrase at every meeting: Angry Birds will be as big as Hello Kitty, as Mickey Mouse, as Mario. For a team of 8 that had barely survived, this sounded delusional. But Vesterbacke had a plan. First move, don't rush to every platform at once. A methodical rollout. iOS, then Android, then PC, then consoles. Each version optimized. When Angry Birds launched on Android in October 2010, 2 million downloads in the first weekend. Second move, merch, plush toys. 60,000 units sold in 4 months. Then t-shirts, backpacks, phone cases, board games. By 2011, $100 million in revenue. Time magazine named Vesterbacke one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. And then, the spin-offs. Angry Birds Seasons, Angry Birds Rio, Angry Birds Space, Angry Birds Star Wars. And here's what matters. These games worked, because each one was the same game. Slingshot, physics, destruction, just in a new wrapper. Star Wars added lightsabers. Space changed the gravity, but the core stayed the same. Everyone topped the charts. By 2012, 1 billion downloads, the first mobile game to reach that milestone. Rovio ballooned from 28 to 224 employees, offices in multiple countries. Angry Birds Land theme parks in Finland and the UK. Angry Birds, soft drinks that outsold Coca-Cola and Pepsi in Finland. Vesterbacke flew to California, doing what Mighty Eagles do, seeking new business partnerships. Zynga offers $2 billion, the same $2 billion I mentioned at the start. Rovio says no. Skype founder Niklas Zennström invests $42 million. Remember this moment, because this is the point where everything looked perfect, and the point from which everything began to fall apart. Because while Rovio was building a merch empire and theme parks, It forgot the game itself. The original Angry Birds hadn't been updated in years. No new levels. No new mechanics. The game that started everything was standing still. By 2013, Angry Birds had dropped to 59th place in the App Store. That's not a catastrophe. It's worse, it's a trend. The mobile market had changed. In 2009, people paid for games. $1 for a game, and you play as long as you want. By 2013, the market had shifted to free-to-play. Candy Crush Saga, Clash of Clans. Free games with microtransactions. Angry Birds was a paid game in a world where everyone expected to play for free. And here, Rovio made its key mistake. Instead of evolving the formula, the slingshot, the physics, the thing that made the game great, it started slapping the Angry Birds logo on completely different genres. Angry Birds Go, racing. Angry Birds Epic, RPG. Angry Birds Stella, a separate spin-off aimed at girls. Remember, the early spin-offs, Seasons, Space, Star Wars, worked because they were the same game in a new wrapper. The new spin-offs were entirely different games with an Angry Birds sticker. The difference between new wrapper and different game is the difference between evolution and brand dilution. Rovio chose the latter. In 2014, profits dropped 73%, from €71 million to 10. Mikhail Head, Nicholas's cousin, CEO, stepped down. 110 employees laid off. In 2015, another 260 layoffs. Merchandise sales dropped 43%. And then Rovio made the decision that was supposed to fix everything. Go back to the roots. Make a real sequel, not an RPG, not a racer, but a proper Angry Birds. The second one, 2015, Angry Birds 2. The official sequel, slingshot, physics, destruction, everything fans wanted, but with one catch. Rovio made it free to play, with a live system, play 5 times then wait or pay, with aggressive microtransactions, with ads after every level. The formula came back, but the trust didn't. IGN called the game greedy. Fans called it a step backward. Those who loved the original for its simplicity and honesty saw a money extraction machine. Result, $15 million in losses, 200 more layoffs. In 2009, Rovio had 8 people and created a hit. In 2015, hundreds of people and couldn't repeat the success. In 2016, Salvation arrives. The Angry Birds movie. Budget, $73 million. Box office, $352 million. The film wasn't a masterpiece. Critics gave it mixed reviews. But for Rovio, it was oxygen for a drowning person. Game downloads spiked. Toys flew off shelves again. Rovio declared, the best year in company history. Returned to profitability with revenue of $201 million. In 2017, IPO on the Nasdaq Helsinki exchange. Valuation, $1 billion. From a company of 8 people on the brink of bankruptcy to a publicly traded company worth $1 billion in 8 years. But here's what nobody said out loud. A movie is a one-time injection, not a cure. Rovio went public on the wave of a film, not on the wave of games. And the stock market demands growth. Every quarter, every year. Shareholders don't wait, they want to see numbers. And that was the peak, the absolute maximum. Everything after was the pressure of a market Rovio had no answer for. After the IPO, Rovio opened a London studio for MMO games. Shut it down within a year. The Angry Birds Movie 2 in 2019 grossed half of the first film. And then, the decision that became the symbol of everything that went wrong. In 2019, Rovio pulled the original Angry Birds from app stores, and Angry Birds Seasons, and Angry Birds Rio, and Angry Birds Space, and Angry Birds Star Wars, the classic games. The very ones that made Rovio what it was. Official reason? Outdated code? We can't maintain these games on newer versions of iOS and Android. Fans didn't buy it. They saw something else. Rovio was removing paid games to force people into newer free-to-play titles, with microtransactions and ads. YouTuber Maximus Overdrive launched the hashtag #BringBack2012. It spread across Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. The fan community erupted. In 2021, Rovio announced, "Fine, we'll make a remake." In 2022, Rovio Classics, Angry Birds launched, a recreation of the game as it was in 2012, for 99 cents. No microtransactions, no ads. Fans rejoiced. #Thank you Rovio. It seemed like Rovio had finally listened. And a year later, in February 2023, Rovio pulled the remake from Google Play. On iOS, renamed it Red's First Flight, to make it harder to find. The reason? Official statement. due to the game's impact on our wider games portfolio. Translation: the paid classic game was taking downloads away from free-to-play games with microtransactions, and Rovio chose microtransactions. The community manager wrote on Discord, "If those other games don't improve and grow, then the outlook of the entire company changes. It's harder to create new games." One fan responded, "Imagine delisting a classic game because players prefer it to your newer cash grabs. And still having the nerve to claim your goal is to craft the best possible experience for players." Here's a detail worth remembering. In 10 months, the remake had 600,000 US downloads. Angry Birds 2 in the same period, 68 million. The remake was 0.6% of all Angry Birds downloads. Rovio deleted a game that represented less than 1% of their downloads. Not because it was stealing players, but because it was a reminder of what the game looked like when Rovio still respected its fans. In April 2023, the finale. The one I told you about at the start. Sega buys Rovio for $776 million. Less than half of what Zynga offered. Less than the IPO valuation. $2,776 million. 12 years. That's what all those decisions cost. Vesterbacke, the mighty eagle, reacted. "It's a reasonably good deal. The brand has a lot more potential." The man who promised the next Mickey Mouse called the sale of his company for $750 million reasonably good. And in February 2026, Sega announced a $200 million impairment write-down for Rovio, because it couldn't integrate Rovio's technology into its own mobile games. $776 million minus $200. And less than 3 years later, Sega acknowledged that a quarter of the sum was money thrown into the wind. In December 2026, the Angry Birds Movie 3 comes out. Mr. Beast and Salish Matter in the cast. Paramount distributing. Sega producing alongside Rovio. The brand is still alive. But the game, the original game that started it all, is still hidden under the name Red's First Flight. Still disguised, so you can't find it. In my Capcom video, I said, most companies don't die from competitors. Not from technology. They die from the inability to admit a mistake. Capcom admitted theirs. 3 times. And came back stronger each time. Rovio never did. Not once. When players tired of spin-offs, Rovio made more spin-offs. When free-to-play models didn't work, made them more aggressive. When fans asked for the classic back, brought it back, then took it away again. Every time Rovio faced a choice between players and money, it chose money. And every time, lost both. This isn't a story about a bad game. Angry Birds was genius. Simple. Honest. A game that burned a Christmas turkey because you couldn't put it down. This is a story about a company that forgot why that turkey burned. And instead of making the next game you can't put down, made 51 versions of the same merchandise. 51 failed games before Angry Birds, and dozens of failed decisions after. The difference is that the first 51 had nothing to lose. The second 51 lost everything. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel. I do breakdowns like this every week. Let me know in the comments. Did you play the original Angry Birds? And what does this game mean to you? See you next time.